And so all of his powers are based on horror movies, being a ghost.
Oh, cool.
And so I figured he could teleport because, like in a horror movie, when there's like a ghost at the end of the hallway and then suddenly they appear in front of the camera, he can teleport like that.
Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of the TF Cast. I'm your host, Willis.
Hey, Grum here. It is October 18th here in the Solarium.
And I'm your host, Jacob Bases. Today with us, we have Ty Marcellus of New World Comics here to talk about the project. I'm going to kick it right over to Ty. Could you introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about New World Comics?
Yeah, so I'm Ty Marcellus, and I have been writing for New World Comics, creating it since 2016 is when I started. And it was actually inspired by going to college here at Mankato for my music business degree. We had a project where we had to replace a clip of film with music. So I was listening to my music and thinking of all the things I could do with it. And as I was listening to my songs, I just thought of these events happening and eventually characters. And one character I thought of, which was actually Firefly, we'll talk about later, but he was the first and he just spiraled into this massive universe. And so now it's a big universe with over 1,600 characters, focused on diversity and inclusion, getting colored characters to the forefront, and just making a universe of superheroes that's as diverse as our real world is. And that's the whole idea, basics of it.
Sure.
1,600 characters, did you say?
Yes. The last time I officially counted, it was 1,502, because I do keep a running count. But I'm finishing up some alternate universe stuff I'm doing, and then I'm going to count again and see where we're at. But it's going to be above 1,600 for sure.
Wow.
How exactly does that work? So I assume, I've only read issue one.
Right.
I've just read the one Firefly comic.
You got a long way to go, Jacob.
But like I assume that there's some way that you keep up with the back end of this, like to make sure there's continuity in all the storylines. Is that what's happening? You build like an encyclopedia of characters, and can you explain the process a little bit?
Yeah, so that's kind of the point. And you know, one of the reasons this comic book universe is different from like Marvel or DC is because not only the diversity, but I'm trying to avoid retcons. Which many comic people hate, you know, what story matters and all of that. So everything is well planned out so that I never have to go back and say, well, you know, this character died, but let's find some contrived way to bring them back to life. There's set established rules for coming back to life, and essentially you have to catch the soul before it leaves. And if you can't do that, well, they're gone for good. So there's more realistic stakes than other comic books by doing that. And so to break down how it actually works, each universe is separated into phases. And so I'm making 4 universes, and each one is going to have 7 phases just because that's how the first one ended up. So I'm just going to stick with 7. So each phase introduces around 100 characters to the story. So they do general superhero things, they stop crimes and whatever, but the phase ends with some kind of major threat. And when that major threat comes, all of the characters have to band together to then stop that threat. However, say half of them, little more, little less, will die. And so that's where we clear room for the next 100 characters for the next phase. And so they just keep shuffling out, and generations, parents, you know, kids, taking up their parents' mantles, and just keep this shuffling of heroes dying and new ones being brought to the forefront. So yeah, and then the 7th phase ultimately is technically where the stories end. And at each point, you know, I'm just starting. Like you said, you only read the one book, which is really all that there is, the 2 actually. But since I'm just starting, you know, at many different points throughout the phases, there's a point where, yes, the characters can beat these big threats. But if I'm not doing good or not selling that good, they could not, and the threat wins, and then that's how it ends. All the way to phase 7, where, yeah, we could end it at phase 7, but at the same time, I've written in a way that they go even past phase 7, and then they get to meet the other characters from these other universes that I'm developing. So it's all very meticulously planned out to avoid retcons and going back on established things.
Yeah. retcon quickly. What is that a short? For
Yeah,
something?
it's for retroactive continuity.
Okay.
So yeah, going back on the continuity.
How do we make this make sense? Because
Right.
technically this person died in season 1, episode 3.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or
Okay.
like, Superman, his villain somehow breaks his arm, and then in the next comic book, the writer doesn't want to have to deal with that. So it's just magically fixed. Like it's just, So everything is planned so that like if something does happen, and as I hire writers too, they're going to have to be like, yeah, this previous writer left off here. So you're going to have to figure your way out from there as best we can.
Like you said, this has been meticulously thought out. How is why have you gone to such lengths at this, like having 2 books done? Is it necessary that you have the whole backstory developed? Is that I assume it gives it some level of like confidence or power, like you said,
Right.
Being able to address the retcons.
Right. It does help a lot. Because like, for example, who is the main character of the universe, because each universe has 2 main characters, a male and a female.
Okay.
And so Night Wraith is the main male character. And the way I write him and all of the stories is I call it storytelling from A to Z. I make their point A, how they originated, were born, got their powers, and then their point Z, how they die. And then everything in between, I'm just going to fill in as I write this stuff.
Wow.
So it helps with that, just to know where they're going, and just all I got to do is write myself to that point. But at the same time, to answer your question too, it's just fun. I just very much enjoy creating these characters and stories.
Yeah.
And every time I have a new one and I'm like, okay, that doesn't fit in the New World Comics universe, but the Old World, which is about ancient, superheroes in ancient times, like that would fit better there. So it's just fun to keep going.
Triple Balls is a media and event production company based in southern Minnesota. We specialize in multicam live streaming and sound and lighting for event productions. Contact us today to learn more, or subscribe online to join our newsletter and stay up to date about events and things going on in the area. Thanks for tuning in. Back to your show.
One question I always have for people that write these hero journeys type things is I write D&D campaigns for my friends, done it many times. One of my favorite things about doing that is that like plot armor doesn't exist. Like a D&D character can just die and it doesn't matter. And I find that to be like one of the hardest things to suspend my disbelief on when I'm watching these things. Have you done anything about that, or is that something that like you struggle with when writing these types of stories?
It's actually not something I struggle with because, kind of like what you're saying, plot armor is annoying. Even though I love Marvel, but my favorite hero from DC is Batman, who is just plot armor is his power.
Yeah.
But my least favorite hero of all time is Superman, kind of for the same reason.
Same here.
Yeah, he just can't die. So even my character, Night Wraith, who has already died, for example, one of his powers being that he's a ghost is he can pass through objects and objects can pass through him. So technically can't die. But in order for him to touch something, like, to punch someone, he has to mentally turn that off so that he can actually make contact.
Yeah.
So when that power's off, he can now be stabbed, shot. He's just as vulnerable as ever. And again, these meticulous rules I've established to avoid stuff like that. Ghost in the universe, you have to basically beg with the god of the universe to even get a second chance and become a ghost. So he was lucky enough to do that. But then that's your only chance. You die again, that's it.
Yeah.
And you don't even get to go back to heaven or hell. Heaven's the only one that can make you a ghost. Hell, you have to be a demon. But you can't even go back to heaven or hell, because if you chose to be a ghost, you got that second chance. If you die, you just basically look at the back of your own eyelids for the rest of your existence, for eternity. And so that rule is in place also because then not only are ghosts less willing to die, obviously that's not, if it was like they just got to go back to heaven, it's like, sure, why not? Who cares? But all of that kind of stuff, just so that even characters who are in some way immortal, there's always a mortality to them.
Cool. And would that character still have the option to capture his soul before it left the plane, or do you lose that option too?
He loses that option too because
Dang.
ghosts don't have souls.
Oh, I see.
So there is none. So yeah, he goes, that's it.
Cool.
Yeah, because his soul already has gone to heaven, did the pleading, and then basically it disappears, but he gets his mind back into his body.
Those fights must be really fun to illustrate.
Yeah.
Kind of like when they fight Tobito and Naruto, if you're a Naruto fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of exactly like that. A lot of and even like one of my favorite powers of his too is I'm a big Nightcrawler fan.
Cool.
And so all of his powers are based on horror movies, being a ghost.
Oh, cool.
And so I figured he could teleport because like in a horror movie when there's like a ghost at the end of the hallway and then suddenly they appear in front of the camera, he can teleport like that. So even writing some of his fight scenes, he's teleporting and like he'll punch someone, teleport to the next guy, punch him, and then like just crazy stuff. So he's a lot of fun.
Wow.
Yeah, I love the whole choreography of like I have to make sure I'm touching them so they don't go incorporeal, but then I need to like make sure that I hit him when he's not, and I'm it's the choreography is insane.
Right. Yeah, and it's a lot of mental work for that hero too, to not be punching someone or maybe choking someone out and then someone pulls out a gun and if he shoots you, that's it. So it's a lot of mental work too, and there will be situations like that where he'll have to drop something or like not touch something because of fearing for his life.
Cool.
So that'll directly play into story beats.
Kind of speaking of origin stories, we didn't get like a whole lot of yours in the comic world. Like so the brand is focused on diversity and inclusion, which in and of itself seems like noble enough for any kind of like American art thing. But like how did you go from having like the one idea to being like, oh, I'm gonna explode this into a whole universe with physical products, and it's just a very large vision. Tell us that story.
So it's kind of, basically during COVID, which kind of had an influence on it. It was a time of like, let's just try this because I'm doing nothing else really. But at the same time, with my love for Marvel, kind of even when I was a kid, the first thing I wrote as a kid really that was not gibberish was a character called CSL, who's like a cheetah hybrid human. And I actually revamped him and brought him into this universe.
Sick.
But like, so even as a kid, I've always just written and wanted to do this. And so in 2016, when I started making that first character, Firefly, I kind of made the rest of the team members who will be with him, Night Wraith included, which that's like the Avengers for me. They're called the Misfits in my universe, focusing on the fact that they don't fit in. But once I made him, I made the Misfits, I made their villains, and then I was like, I had this whole completed story. And then I thought of a new character, and I was like, great, this character doesn't fit. I don't want them to be a villain, but I already have too many heroes on the team. What do I do? And so it's like, well, new story. The Misfits take place in Chicago because I figured I wanted it to be in the Midwest, but I wanted it to be like a big enough city that is known for not being so good. So then I thought, these new heroes, well, let's put them in Minneapolis for like a smaller scale story, or some of them down in Texas for something real small scale, in the deserts down in the South, and just all this random stuff. So yeah, as these ideas kept flowing, wherever they didn't fit, I just found a way to make them fit through another story, and that's really how it exploded.
Could you talk a bit about designing villains? That's something that's always been really interesting to me, like designing like the story and how they're going to interact with either I guess I don't know if these villains are like through the whole story, or they're like kind of Night Wraith has this villain and Firefly has this villain kind of thing.
There's a little bit of both. There's some villains that are obviously main antagonists that will follow the hero to the ends of the earth and appear in many stories. But then there's also a few one-off villains that I made that are almost like more comedic most of the time. But at the same time, villains are what a comic book universe has to be made of the most, because they get defeated and then you need a new one to come in, where the hero almost never gets defeated. So I have a lot of villains, probably more than heroes, But at the same time, I want any writers that I hire to have the capacity to bring their own in. So I specifically didn't make enough villains so that, you know, a writer, they come with a good idea, sure, toss it in. Like if you're willing to, and, you know, we can, of course, in the future work on a contract, like who owns what when it comes to the legality of it. But, you know, I'm willing to take ideas, suggestions, and especially once I finish these universe storylines, because I'm probably going to, say that now, but we'll see. Probably going to stop at the 4 multiverses I've made. And so once I stop at those and whatever new idea pops up, they'll just probably be villains. That'll be what I'll be doing once I finish the stories, is just villain creation and inserting them in.
Like logistically, where's it all at? You know, like where do you, like you've kind of alluded to hiring people, or like what's out there physically in the world? Like what's the vision for like the brand and the product and just generally how it moves?
Yeah, so it's getting a lot better. It was really only during COVID that, you know, again, I actually tried to do this. So as far as where it's at, I myself have obviously created the universe, and I've written 21 comic book scripts for single issues. I have one artist hired who is the main artist, Nico Turan, who's on both books. He's from England. And then I have another artist that is working on a book for me right now. He is from Brazil. So I'm waiting on, I think he's only got a few more pages left. He's almost done. So I'm waiting on some of that stuff, and I'm in talks with a few other artists to start. So I'm slowly hiring artists, especially artists that agree that, you know, I can't pay your, you know, standard comic book fee for a normal artist. But if, you know, artists that are just starting out, I'm willing to give anyone a shot. And if we can agree on a price, that's how I hire artists right now. But essentially, the ultimate end goal is to be, I keep bringing them up, like Marvel, as they currently are with the movies and, you know, comics and all that. And so to get there right now, I've hired, not really hired, it's free, but I have a business mentor who's helping me. I have to make it into a LLC and, you know, open accounts and stuff like that for this, that I haven't done some of that yet. I'm also appearing at Twin Cities Con this year, November 3rd through the 5th for the second time. And I'll be giving a talk there about the comic universe like I'm doing now. So hopefully that will open more opportunities. But the main thing, the main focus is getting Firefly published, because it's the only one that I don't have published right now. But I'm doing some crowdfunding for that. And then once, I'm not running the crowdfunding now, but the idea is once I run the crowdfunding, and if it goes well, I should never have to run crowdfunding again. And I should be able to just put out the books on a regular schedule. Because I learned a lot from publishing the first book. The first book cost me about $6,000 to publish plus marketing costs. But I learned like the perfect binding that it has to it, the type of paper I chose. You know, I could make cheaper options there. So I'm willing or guessing that Firefly is going to be about half the cost. So if I can do that, if I can make it half the cost, then I don't need to crowdfund anymore. I can just put a book out, sell it, use that money to put the next one out, and we should get a better rotation. So that's kind of where it's at right now.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read comic books since I was a kid. That was the first time I read a comic book in 20 years, probably. And my experience with them was like newspaper.
Right.
Then,
yeah.
And I read it on my iPad. I didn't actually get to feel it, but this is more like a magazine almost.
Yeah, and that's really what a lot of newer ones are. And even Firefly seems almost equal to Night Wraith in quality, but that's actually cheaper paper than the other one. But the reason I chose to make that one the way I did, kind of fun story, when I was at GalaxyCon, when that still came to Minnesota, I think it only did for like 2 years. But I met Christopher Priest, who was writing all of the Black Panther stories throughout the 90s and early 2000s. Wow. And I sat down with him and I showed him my universe and these ideas. And he liked it enough to give me his Black Panther comic book script that he signed. So I modeled my comic book scripts after his. And then he also gave me, or actually I think I owned it, that first Black Panther issue. And it looks exactly like Night Wraith does. It's got the perfect binding, that type of paper. So I went in, with that idea, like I want my book to look just like this.
Cool.
And so now looking back, you know, I could have made cheaper decisions, but it was mostly just the emulation of Christopher Priest in that Black Panther book, because Black Panther is my favorite superhero of all time.
Sure.
Cool.
Are these going to be like, will you be able to buy these like at the local comic book shop here? Or?
Yeah. So I guess hopefully, because so Night Wraith right now is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You know, that one's published, so it's in a lot of places. It's also at Source Comics and Games in Minneapolis, the big store.
Cool.
But I've been talking to the guys at the comic book store here, and I think on 3 or 4 different occasions we've emailed and nothing has come of it. It seems that, you know, I'm sure they're busy and they just don't reply to me at a certain point. And I know they're interested. I know it's not because like they don't want the book, because they always tell me, even when I walk in the store, they're like, hey, you know, we want to carry your book. I'm like, well, respond to my email.
Yeah.
So respond to their email.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'm trying. I'm still, you know, I've been slacking on it, getting ready for the Comic-Con coming up and all that. But yeah, hopefully I'd love to if we could just get an actual good email thread going.
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah, it's like difficult to imagine, because there's like when you walk into a comic book shop, there's so much. Like I can't even imagine how many different comic book companies there are. Like, what is it like to come into the market? And like, you know, are there a lot of people doing startups or kind of like one-offs, or, you know, like what is this type of ambition normal, or like?
Yes and no. I feel like, and we'll see how it goes, honestly, with me. But, you know, a lot of people, not even just people in the comic industry, but a lot of people have questioned putting out Night Wraith and Firefly versus just a bunch of Night Wraith to get people hooked. But the idea from me is, you know, I want people to know right off the bat that this is a larger universe. I just wanted to get that across, which is why the plan right now is to put out all 7. 2 of them are twin brother and sister, so they'll have a shared book. So 6 of the members of the Misfits team, and then going back to Night Wraith and, you know, doing some more of him and more of Firefly. But I want to get the origin stories of the 7 members out first. Again, just to get across that this is a major universe. So other comic book artists, you know, that's normally what they do, is putting out just the one character, and then, you know, if it gets popular, making the bigger universe later. But otherwise, for the most part, though, like the people in the comic book industry have been very welcoming, way more than the music business. That's dog eat dog, and people will step on you for no reason. But comic books, I've noticed it's been a lot more open. People are willing to talk. I've even sat down, like I said, with Christopher Priest and with Steven, can't remember his name, but the Image Comics head publisher. I've sat down with him, and everyone's just willing to talk about it and see your ideas. And at first I was afraid that talking about my ideas, people would steal them. But then I learned more about creative control and, you know, kind of the legality with intellectual property, and pretty much safe. So when I started talking about a lot more, that's really when I got more opportunities to meet people and give public speakings at, like, I went down to Iowa for a couple, but yeah, it's been really nice and open.
Yeah, you mentioned you did some public speaking, and is it that you're sharing about the vision for your series, for the universes?
Yeah, it's about the vision and what the comic books are about, a lot of the stuff I'm saying here. But it's also about why, too, which I was going to get to here, too. So the reason why it's focused on diversity is mainly because I'm obviously, maybe not so obviously, African-American. And my mother is white, Caucasian. And so I went to a small town school that is actually where I teach at now, ironically enough. But I didn't have a great experience there. I was bullied a lot for my color and my weight too. And that bullying sometimes even got physical, which led me to taking fighting classes, which kind of is how I write the fighting scenes now in my comic books, because I've taken at least 3 different martial arts. So not only that, but my little sister too is adopted from China. So we are a very diverse family with my 2 white parents, myself, and then my Chinese sister. So diversity is just, I just live in it. So I wanted to show it to the world because, you know, I always believe that people of different races and really people with anything that they can't control shouldn't be hated for it. So that's kind of the idea, is that anyone can be a hero regardless of skin color, religion, anything like that. It's just your character. And so, yeah. And then moreover than that too, just touching on issues that I'm no prophet, but, you know, I feel like I have a lot of things to say on certain issues, the things that I've gone through, especially like depression. I've gone through one major stint of depression when I was younger. But yeah, talking about things that I feel like I have something to say about, and maybe people could benefit from hearing it. And so I did that at first with my music as a hip hop performer and instrumentalist. And now I'm just doing the same thing, but through comics.
Yeah, sounds like a powerful way to use your voice. So that's awesome to hear.
Is that something that you saw like are there other companies that are doing similar stuff, or is this like kind of answering like something that you saw a big void in the comic industry growing up? Like, did you even spend a lot of time with comic books growing up?
Oh yeah. I definitely spent a lot of time with comic books, and I don't think that what I'm doing is a major void, especially because, you know, Marvel and DC still have mostly Caucasian heroes, but as times have progressed, they're getting better. The only issue with them is that because they're so big and, you know, of course, worried about losing what they've built, these characters have to get pre-approved and, you know, focus groups and all stuff like that, which makes sense. But then it takes longer for those characters to come and be published, versus my universe, like, they're diverse right off the bat, right away.
I would also say in Marvel, they're mostly either presented as a side character or they get like a smaller thing. Like for example, the Mrs. Marvel or Ms. Marvel and She-Hulk
right. Yeah, exactly. So just really putting them to the forefront. But I think if there is a hole that I'm filling for sure is, again, I kind of already said it, there's really no universe that is as diverse as mine is. There's of course diverse comics, but like they're not all belonging to this one singular universe. So that's really the void that I'm filling, and why, you know, my target is, and the people I mentioned, is Marvel and DC. It's lofty goals considering I just started, but you know, to be a universe that big with this idea of being also extremely diverse and real, you know, real, no retcons and all of that.
Yeah. Well, when you say real, does this happen in our universe? Like, obviously, so in Firefly, like, it starts out in Chicago. So like it are the rules that we currently have? Like, what kind of game are we playing here?
Yeah, so it's, you could say, because there's obviously superpowers in it, you could say it's like a directly parallel universe to ours. But in the universe, history happened as it happened in our universe, and everything scientifically, other than the sci-fi, you know, is still pretty sound. So Night Wraith, through his journey, will actually meet figures, because he gets his powers right before the War of 1812. So we'll actually meet figures throughout history from 1812 into the modern day, and real people who existed. And even I've written the second and third Night Wraith book, and so even during one of the battles of 1812 that he is in, I researched where troops were stationed, where the attackers came from, and that way Night Wraith is like in the actual place where they would have come in the town from. So it's really accurate, and that's partly because my favorite video game series of all time is Assassin's Creed. And those video games, they just literally, you're playing history, but they've inserted a fictional character into it, and that's what Night Wraith is. History happened as it is, and I just insert him into it. And same thing with you know, the modern day characters. As things happen, you know, maybe it depends on when this all gets published, but if Trump's president again, you know, President Trump might factor into a story, or he'll just make a brief appearance, but it'll be very close to our actual world.
So you mentioned next steps look like getting an issue published from each of the primary universes. And then starting to build out. It's an ambitious project. It sounds pretty exciting.
Like what other kind of heroes can we expect?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's obviously a lot. So of the, I guess I'll give you guys the option. Do you want to hear the Misfits team, or do you want to hear like the eventual multiversal team that comes from like other universes?
I guess I shouldn't say I'm invested, but I
Yeah, I would
in
say
the Misfits. Let's hear that.
All right, let's do that. So, Misfit wise, so of course we have Night Wraith, the main character, the ghost who was a African American slave in the 1800s, and then became a ghost. Firefly, then he is the comedian of the team, one of two actually, because he meets someone else that he really vibes with, and they make a lot of jokes together. So he's meant to be the funny guy, and then also his position on the team being the only ex-con. Is that he still has connections in the criminal underworld. So whenever the team needs something, they hear about a deal going down, they need more information, Firefly can just walk in as himself and be like, hey, remember me? And, everyone in the criminal world kind of knows him, and they, at least for the time, haven't figured out he's a hero now. So they'll tell him anything, especially because he also plays dumb. He's got a very kind of dumb persona to him, but he's not dumb. And so that also lets him more into like, people will tell him things just because he seems like an idiot. So there's him. And then CSL, that character I made when I was 8, is back. So he's that cheetah human hybrid with the power of super speed with the cheetah in him. And he's an Indian American man. And so I should go back. Firefly, Mexican American. So the diversity thing. So he's Indian American, and he is that second comedian to Firefly. So him and CSL really vibe together, and they make a lot of jokes. And then you have the twin brother and sister I mentioned. So the first one is Matter Amasser, and they're both Caucasian, and he is representative of, like, I don't want to say overweight in a bad way, but, chubbier heroes. He's not your typical muscular, ripped hero. But his power is he absorbs matter and becomes matter, but then also becomes, he can't grow smaller than he is, but he can become the size of larger matter. So if he absorbed, for example, a whole house, he would be the size of a house with his arms and limbs being made out of bricks and wood and steel and whatever. Cool. So that's what he can do. And then his twin sister, Golden Eagle, she has just the powers of wings on her back, specifically, brown eagle wings. But she is the smartest on the team. She's also the best hand-to-hand combat fighter, but she's the tech genius and fighter of the team. She doesn't have any like extra strength or anything like that, so she'll still need like the heavy hitters for help there. But in a normal hand-to-hand combat with a normal human, she's going to take them every time. Let's see, where am I at now? So Rajak is another one. He's one of my favorites too, especially because his story. So he is a man who was sent to hell when he died. And the way hell works in my universe, part of the punishment is that you have no idea why you got sent there. You don't know what you did in your life. You don't know, maybe you killed someone, but you're not told. So like that's part of the torture is, in your mind, you're not supposed to be there. So he doesn't know who he is, but he doesn't like hell. He wants a change. He wishes he went to heaven, obviously, as most people would. So he runs from the devil himself, and is one of the only ones to successfully do so, and is now on earth to be a hero to try to change his fate to gain heaven's favor. So he's hiding from the devil, who will be sending demons and eventually showing up himself to get him back. But he's with this hero team to again try to change his fate. So I love his story. I think he's really cool as well.
What are his abilities?
Basically, as being a demon, so with angels and demons, since they're not given a second chance, when they die, they get to respawn back at heaven and hell to restart again. But of course, again, the reason he wouldn't do that is because he's running from the devil. If he goes back, he's going to be punished horribly.
I see.
Tortured, and yeah. So he also doesn't want to die, even though for him it's technically not that bad. But his powers, though, is he's basically like think of like the best ninja you've ever seen in your life. He's a fighter. He's stealthy because he's black and red, so he blends in with the darkness. And then he has retractable blades that come from his wrist and kind of curve over his hand. So these curved blades that he uses to fight with too. And he looks very scary. But again, he's trying to be a hero. So I do want that to factor into one of his stories as well, where I'm thinking of like him trying to save somebody and them refusing, like maybe a building's burning and them refusing to go with him because he's a demon. He looks scary, but he's like desperately trying to save them. So part of his story too will be that, what his image is versus personality and what's on the inside kind of moral for his story.
Yeah, sounds like it's loosely based on your favorite video game.
Yeah, loosely, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Very similar.
How do these deities work? You like there's some kind of being in heaven and hell,
right.
and there's some kind of moral balance to it all, but I haven't heard an allusion to like a specific like way that works.
So there's everything is planned out. There's an answer for all of this, I promise you. But so the main god of the universe is made up to not offend any religions, but all religions still exist in the universe and all of their gods are valid. So there's certain tiers of gods that go down. So the main god at the top of it is called the Telsnae, and Telsnae. And if you anagram those letters out, it spells Stan Lee, who was my biggest inspiration. So Stan Lee is essentially the god of my universe. So that god created these lesser known gods, which are called the galaxy gods. And what their job is they handle galaxies. So they were basically given these galaxies and told they could do what they want, whatever they wanted with. And so our galaxy god, known as Cook, ends up going to Egypt, which is where I got the name from, an Egyptian god. And he's worshipped by the Egyptians. And there's a lot more that happens, including like a giant universal war. But basically, he ends up liking the Egyptians the most and gives them superpowers, which makes them the world's first superheroes. And so, kind of off topic, but going into the modern day, there's a serum that's created that gives most of the modern day heroes their powers, but it kills like 80% of the people that take it. And they realize it's because in order to get powers, you have to have Egyptian DNA. So the serum just unlocks that Egyptian gene from this god, making them powerful beings. And so what happens then in the universe with these Egyptians that he gave powers to, literally everyone in Egypt, they end up leaving and using their powers to start other cultures. And so of course this is very similar to our history because life started in Africa. And so as they branch out, one of them might decide to call himself Zeus and go to Greece, and that's the one with lightning powers. And so it's all, so the gods in this sense, they are actually gods, but at the same time they're not. They're just humans who got the first powers.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And so all of the humans that got the first powers, they are powerful enough to be gods, but the modern powered people are less powerful, so they're not considered gods. But as I mentioned, there's two main characters from every universe, a male and a female. So Night Wraith and the female main character Skybreaker, and all the others from the other universes, they actually, by the end of their story, spoiler alert, but this is like 30 years worth of story to get here, they will become new gods. And that's what I said when I mentioned before, you could hear about the Misfits or these multiversal heroes. The multiversal team is made up of the male and female main characters from each universe who have now become gods. So yeah, it's, like I said, A to Z storytelling. It's all, where it's eventually going.
So ostensibly you're going to sit down at a desk in the next couple of days and like get to work on some part of it. What part are you most likely to work on, or what part of it are you most excited about right now?
Yeah, so right now I'm actually going back and forth phase for phase for the old world universe, which again is like superheroes in an ancient time, not the Egyptian thing I mentioned, separate universe.
Okay.
But and then I'm also making Next World, which is the opposite, which is a cyberpunk universe where at first there aren't any superpowers. Everything is technology based. So I think I started with I started with Old World. So I made phase 1 there, and then I went to Next World, made phase 1, and now I'm at phase 2 for Old World that I'm actually almost done with. Okay. So right now the storyline I'm writing is actually based off of something I always wanted to write as a kid. I always found it weird how Greek and Roman mythologies are almost exactly the same. And of course it's because Rome liked Greece. They came after and they just stole everything from them. But I'm having mythological figures from Greece and Rome fight each other in this ancient universe. So right now I have 3 more Roman heroes to make to finish that story out. And then I'm moving on to my comic book adaptation of the Mahabharata tale from India. And I've been studying that one a little bit. I read the tale and then I watched like a 15-minute breakdown of it video, and then I have another 30-minute breakdown I'm going to watch to like fully get it, and then start making the characters for that one.
Wow. Cool.
So it's basically the next thing I'll be working on are those 3 Romans, and then moving on to the Mahabharata.
Wow, it sounds like you got your work cut out for you, man. That's pretty exciting.
Awesome.
It's a lot. At the same time I'm doing this, I'm doing performances still for music, and I'm teaching and getting my master's degree, and it's a lot. But wherever I find time, I sit down and make some characters.
What's your master's degree in? Is it still music?
Actually, no. So I, like I said, I'm a teacher, so I teach English now.
Oh, okay.
So to make a long story short, when I graduated in music, I booked concerts was how I made most of my money. And I booked for a few different places, but, nationally, I booked in Texas and wherever, all from here. I never went there, but, and so when COVID happened and you stopped being able to do shows anymore, I, was let go and I needed to find a backup. So teaching was always kind of the backup. So I went back for teaching, and luckily, because I had already taken so many writing classes, I only had to take 7 courses to get my new degree. So teaching was just kind of the backup. And so now my master's is going to be in English literature and English studies. Because if I'm going to teach, because teachers don't make a lot, which is why I need the crowdfunding and all that, the pay is horrible. But if I'm going to teach, I want to go up to the highest level and teach college and make the most money.
Cool.
So I'm doing the master's now, and then the doctorate will be next.
Awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think is there anything else we should touch on in this podcast, either about the comics or your work? Otherwise, what I want to do is let people know where they can find them, where they can connect with you, and keep up with it all. Yeah,
I mean, I think we kind of covered a lot, and obviously there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, I'm still spinning, dude.
Yeah. Which I can show you too, because I have all of this stuff is on Dropbox folders. That's how I keep it all organized. Oh, cool. So I can even just show you my Dropbox here at the end, and you can do some scrolling and just see how big it is. But yeah, I mean, I guess nothing else really that I can think of. So to find me, it's New World Comics on all social media, NU World Comics, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm trying to post more on Twitter. I'm not good at it, but I'm trying. So Twitter's still there. And then newworldcomics.com is the website. So you can go there as well. And then the website kind of shows you where to get books. But as I mentioned, if you look up Night Wraith, it's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Itasca Books, which is my publisher's site, which makes me the most money. So get it from Itasca Books. And then Firefly is just available digitally right now. And like I said, we just finished the updated version, so we will have to be updating that here shortly. And then I'll also be printing it and bringing that book as well as CSL and Night Wraith, all 3, to Twin Cities Con November 3rd through the 5th. So if anyone buys tickets to that, you can see me there. And then I also just found out, I think I found this out like 2 days ago, that I'm giving a whole talk too at 3 p.m. on the Sunday of the con. So I'll be basically doing the same thing, talking about the universe, but going in a little bit more personal depth as I usually do with my public speaking stuff.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that opportunity too. That sounds great.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, that
today.
was
We're
awesome.
excited to hear about it. And
I'm excited to read Night Wraith after reading
Yeah.
Firefly.
I'm looking into it. Cool.
Heck yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.